I never thought a simple dinner invitation would change everything. I mean, what harm is there in letting a few of my husband's friends come over for a little food, a few drinks, some laughs? They'd been to our house before. We all knew each other well enough. I trusted them. Or maybe I trusted myself too much. Either way, something shifted that night, something I can't take back, and I don't know if I ever want to. When I let them in, I didn't just open the front door. I cracked open a piece of myself I didn't even know was still alive, and once it came out, I couldn't put it back. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt so invisible in your own home that even the sound of your own laugh surprises you? So hollow that when someone finally looks at you, really looks at you, you suddenly remember what it feels like to be human again? Yeah, that's where I was. Not broken, not angry, just forgotten. And it's funny because the worst part of being neglected isn't the silence, it's how loud your thoughts get when no one's paying attention to you. That night started off so normal. The house was quiet. My husband was out of town again, on another one of his endless business trips to Cresthaven. I was in leggings, hair tied up, face bare. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't thinking anything would happen. Then came the knock, and I opened the door to them. All three of them, smiling, joking, standing there like it was just another Saturday night. But something in their eyes was different. Or maybe something in me was. I should have said no. I should have smiled politely, said maybe another time, and closed the door. But instead, I stepped aside, and I let them in. And I swear, the second they walked through that door, I could feel the air change. You know what I mean, that thick, electric kind of tension that you can't see, but your skin feels it. Yeah, that kind of air. I laughed more that night than I had in months. Not because anything was that funny, but because it felt good to be noticed, to be heard, to be seen. I don't even remember who poured the first glass of wine, but I do remember how my fingers brushed against one of theirs when I reached for my drink. I remember the way he didn't move his hand right away, and I remember not pulling mine back either. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't wake up that morning thinking I'd cross a line. But sometimes the lines blur so slowly that by the time you realize it, you're already on the other side, and you can't uncross it. It wasn't about sex. It was about being alive, being touched, heard, wanted. You see, when you go too long without something, without affection, without connection, it doesn't take much to light a fire under your skin. And that night, those three men. They didn't just light it. They poured gasoline on it. But I'm getting ahead of myself because what happened behind that door wasn't just physical. It was emotional. It was complicated. And it changed everything. Before I tell you the full story, I need you to do one thing for me. If you've ever felt stuck between loneliness and desire, if you've ever been on the edge of doing something you told yourself you never would, then you're going to want to hear what happened next. So before we dive deeper, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This is The Secrets and Lies, and these aren't just stories. They're raw, messy, painfully honest lessons in love, betrayal, temptation, and the cracks that form when no one's watching. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Because that night, that one night, changed everything. I used to be someone else. Someone full of fire, curious, flirty, a little wild sometimes. The kind of woman who danced barefoot in the kitchen while cooking, who wore lipstick just to feel good in her own skin. That was me once. But over time, that woman faded. Slowly, quietly, almost without me noticing. 10 years of marriage has a way of sanding down your edges, especially when the man you married slowly starts living more in hotel rooms and boardrooms than in your life. His name is Nathan, and I loved him. I still do, in some strange way. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me. He became this blur of phone calls and deadlines, always on his laptop, always away. Even when he was home in Willowridge, it felt like he wasn't. He'd walk past me in the kitchen, kiss my cheek without really looking, ask if I needed anything, never wait for the answer. We didn't fight. We didn't scream. We just drifted, like two boats tied together but facing opposite directions. I tried for a long time. New recipes, new lingerie, little notes in his suitcase before a trip. But after a while, the silence I got in return started speaking louder than anything else. So I stopped trying. I folded myself up and became the version of me that fit inside his absence. I'd eat dinner alone most nights, sometimes cereal, sometimes nothing at all. I'd sleep on the edge of the bed, curled up like a question mark, wondering what it would feel like to be touched again, not out of routine, but out of want. And that's the place I was in when his friends came over that night. Ethan was the first to walk in, confident as ever, flashing that smile he always wore like a weapon. He and Nathan went way back, college roommates, business partners in their early days. And Ethan, he was the type who always had something clever to say. Charming, sure, but underneath all that smooth talk, I could always sense something watchful, like he noticed more than he let on. Then there was Caleb, quieter, gentle, the one who hung back and listened. He was the kind of man who asked how you were doing and meant it. We'd had a few real conversations over the years. Once, after a holiday party, I remember sitting on the porch with him while everyone else was inside. He said, "You don't laugh the way you used to." I didn't respond. I just looked at him, and he nodded, like he already knew. And then there was Lucas, Trouble, the playful kind. The one who always pushed the line just to see how far he could take it. He made jokes that teetered on the edge, always laughed too loud, but he had this energy, like he could spark something in you if you stood too close. The three of them together, they were like a pack, different in their own ways, but always circling back to each other. And for some reason, that night, they circled around me. My house is nothing fancy. Suburban, quiet, in Willow Ridge. It looks fine from the outside, neat lawn, white fence, little potted plants by the porch. But inside, it's like a museum of routines. Everything in its place, but nothing alive. TV remote exactly where he leaves it, wine glass never used, a dining table that still seats 6, though it hasn't seen 6 people in years. That night, when they walked in, I saw it through their eyes, the dim lighting, the untouched books on the shelf, the emptiness. It was like they stepped into a space that had been paused midlife. But they didn't seem to care. Ethan kicked his shoes off, made himself at home. Caleb offered to help me set the table. Lucas cracked open a bottle of wine without asking, already pulling out chairs. And just like that, my house felt different. Not better, not worse, just fuller. I caught myself laughing. Not politely, not because I was supposed to, but because something inside me cracked open just a little. And in that tiny opening, they all stepped in. It wasn't about being attracted to them, at least not at first. It was about the way they made me feel, like I wasn't invisible, like I still mattered, like I still had something in me that could pull someone's attention across the room and hold it. Caleb asked me about a book I'd mentioned years ago. Lucas teased me about my terrible playlist choices. Ethan said, "You still have that spark, even if you try to hide it." And I felt warm, not from the wine, but from being seen for the first time in what felt like years. I felt in the room, present, real. I'd spent so long ghosting through my own life, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, not in a grand way, not in some romantic fairy tale kind of way, just wanted in the small ways that say, "I see you. I hear you. You're here." And that was the beginning. Because once you've tasted that kind of attention, once someone speaks to the parts of you that have been starving for too long, it becomes harder and harder to pretend you're satisfied with crumbs. And I knew, as I sat there between them, laughing, pouring more wine, letting the conversation linger a little longer than it should, something was shifting. Not loudly, not all at once, but gently, delicately, like a curtain being pulled back from a window you didn't realize was closed. And I didn't stop it. I didn't even want to. Nathan left that Friday morning, suitcase in hand, tie half done, phone already pressed to his ear. He kissed the top of my head without breaking stride, didn't even make eye contact, said, "I'll call you tonight," like it was just a line from a script he'd memorized. I nodded, smiled the way I always do, watched him pull out of the driveway like I'd watched 100 times before. The silence that followed felt familiar, comfortable even. I knew the rhythm by now, the quiet mornings, the long afternoons, the cold bed at night. I made coffee, scrolled through my phone, picked up breakfast I didn't really want. It was just another weekend alone. I didn't expect the knock at the door. It was just after 7. I hadn't changed out of my soft pants, no makeup, hair a mess. I almost didn't answer, but something made me check. And there they were, Ethan, Caleb, Lucas, grinning like mischievous schoolboys, arms full of takeout bags and 2 bottles of wine. Ethan said, "We figured you'd be alone, so dinner's on us." Lucas winked, "Couldn't let you waste another Friday night in silence, could we?" I laughed, a little startled. I told them I wasn't really expecting company. Caleb just smiled, soft and easy, and said, "We'll leave if you want. Just thought we'd check in." And right there, in that moment, something shifted. Not in them, in me. Because I should have said no, should have politely smiled, thanked them, and sent them away. But instead, I opened the door wider, and I let them in. The smell of garlic and soy sauce filled the kitchen. They unpacked everything like they belonged there, plates, napkins, the wine already uncorked. I stood by the counter for a second, watching them move around my space like it wasn't strange at all. Like it wasn't strange that 3 grown men showed up unannounced while my husband was out of town. Like it wasn't strange that I hadn't said no. I sat down across from them, tried to act casual, but I could feel the energy shifting. It wasn't obvious, not yet. It was just different. Caleb passed me a plate and asked how I'd been, but it wasn't small talk. It was the kind of question that came from someone who noticed. Lucas teased me about the way I organized the kitchen, then leaned in closer than he needed to when he handed me a fork. And Ethan, he watched me quietly, steady, like he was trying to figure out what was missing in me and why. I poured 1 glass of wine, then another, and another. Somewhere between the 3rd glass and the 2nd helping of dumplings, I started to feel something loosen inside me, not drunk, not tipsy, just unguarded. Caleb asked about the book I was reading. Lucas found a playlist on his phone and started playing music through the speaker in the living room. Ethan leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine, like he was waiting for something to happen. And maybe I was too. The music filled the room, soft R&B, low and slow, the kind that wraps itself around your thoughts. I laughed more than I meant to, let my hand rest a little longer when I passed Caleb a napkin, noticed how Ethan's eyes lingered when I bent to grab something from the floor, caught Lucas watching me from the hallway mirror, like he was studying something he wasn't supposed to see. But none of us said anything, not directly. It was all unspoken, all hidden under layers of casual words and subtle glances. But it was there, thick in the air, quiet between the notes of the music, breathing under the surface of every laugh, every look, every almost touch. They stayed longer than they should have. Long after the food was gone, long after the wine had turned our conversations into confessions, stories of the past, of mistakes, of regrets, of the things we wish we could go back and change. Ethan said, "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Caleb nodded, said, "Or like you lost pieces of yourself along the way." Lucas added, "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I made just one different choice." And then they looked at me, and I didn't say anything, because my silence was already speaking for me. I was the different choice, the road not taken, the what if they never dared say out loud until now. I should have asked them to leave. I should have stood up and said, "Thanks for coming, it's getting late." But I didn't. Because for the first time in a very long time, I wanted to stay in that moment. Not because I was bored, not because I was drunk, but because I was starved for something I didn't even realize I was missing. They made me feel awake, present, real. And the most dangerous part. I wasn't afraid, not yet. I couldn't sleep that night, even after they left, after the music faded, the door shut, the dishes sat rinsed and stacked neatly in the sink. My mind wouldn't quiet. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything, the way Ethan looked at me, like he could see through every layer I'd learned to wear, the way Lucas leaned in close, teased me about the way I blushed when he said my name, the way Caleb's hand brushed my shoulder when he helped me with the plates, and how I didn't move away. I told myself it didn't mean anything. They were just being kind, just familiar, comfortable. It was nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like my skin was humming, like my body remembered something my mind had tried to forget. It wasn't even about sex. It was about being seen, heard, desired. And that's what scared me. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting that. I stopped looking for it, stopped believing I still had the kind of light in me that could draw someone in. And yet, there I was, lying in the dark, still tasting the laughter, still feeling the warmth in the places where they'd looked at me too long, stood too close. Why did it feel so good? Why did their attention feel like oxygen? Why did my heart race when Ethan tilted his head and said, "You've still got it"? Why did I lean in when Lucas whispered, "If I were him, I'd never leave you alone like this"? Why did my body respond to Caleb's silence, the way he listened, really listened, like it was something sacred? This is wrong. This is wrong. I'm a wife. Nathan's wife. And even though he's not perfect, even though he forgets birthdays and misses dinners and barely touches me anymore, he's my husband. He chose me. I chose him. We built a life. So why do I feel like I'm waking up next to a stranger every morning? Why do I feel like I'm disappearing a little more every day? And why did tonight feel more like home than anything I've felt in months? I sat on the edge of the bed and looked over at our wedding photo on the dresser. That moment when we were smiling under the oak tree, surrounded by flowers and promises. I used to look at that photo and feel warmth. Now I just looked away. It hurt too much. Because the woman in that picture, she was so sure. She had hope in her eyes. She believed that love would be enough. But the woman sitting here now. She's tired, lonely, starving for connection in a house full of silence. I thought about the way Ethan watched me, like I was still worth watching, not like a possession, not like someone he could win, but like a person, a woman, like I mattered. I thought about the way Lucas made me laugh, not a polite, forced laugh, but the kind that shakes something loose inside you, the kind I hadn't heard in years. And Caleb didn't even have to say much. He just sat with me in the quiet, and sometimes that's more intimate than any touch. I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat by the window. It was so still outside. The moon was hanging low, soft and silver, like it knew my secrets. And I kept asking myself, what does it mean that I felt more alive in one evening with 3 men who aren't my husband than I have in 10 years with the one who is? Does that make me weak? Broken? Selfish? Or just human? Because I don't think I meant for any of this to happen. I didn't go looking for trouble. I didn't set out to cross a line. I was just tired of being unseen, tired of walking into rooms where no one looked up, tired of dressing up only to be ignored, tired of giving and never feeling full. I kept thinking, maybe they didn't mean anything by it. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe Ethan was just being friendly. Maybe Lucas's jokes were harmless. Maybe Caleb's gentle hand on my shoulder wasn't loaded with meaning. But deep down, I knew better. Because I've been starving for so long that even a drop of affection felt like a feast. And here's the part that scares me the most, I didn't feel guilt. Not right away. I felt relief, warmth, like something in me had finally been noticed, like a door had cracked open just enough for the light to come in. And now that I'd felt it again, I didn't know how to go back. I didn't know how to pretend that my world hadn't shifted, even if only by inches. And I knew this wasn't over. Because once you feel seen, you'll do almost anything to keep from going invisible again. The next evening, they came back. I didn't invite them, not directly. But I didn't say no either. Ethan texted me around 6 o'clock, still have wine left from last night. We're thinking round 2, unless you're busy. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, doors open. I didn't clean, didn't fix my hair, didn't try to make it look like I was expecting anything more than company. But deep inside, a part of me was. They arrived just after sunset. Caleb had brought dessert, some kind of chocolate torte from a bakery across Willow Ridge. Lucas carried a speaker under his arm and a mischievous grin. Ethan just gave me that look again, the one I didn't know how to name. I told myself it was innocent, just another evening, just familiar faces. But when the four of us sat in the living room, something was different. The air felt heavier, like the silence between us was holding a breath. It started with music again, low, warm, slow, the kind that slips under your skin. Then Lucas said, let's play a game. I rolled my eyes, smiled. What kind of game? Nothing wild, he said, grinning. Just never have I ever. I laughed. We're too old for that. Ethan raised his glass. Exactly why we should play. So we did. It started off playful. Never have I ever gotten a tattoo. Never have I ever snuck out of a house. Never have I ever kissed someone I shouldn't have. That's when the energy shifted. I noticed Ethan watching me when I lifted my glass after that last one. Caleb cleared his throat. Lucas just smirked and said, now we're getting somewhere. More wine, more laughter. Then Ethan said, softly, never have I ever wanted someone I couldn't have. It hung in the air like a confession. No one spoke right away. And then, one by one, we all drank. Except Ethan. He just watched me drink, and I knew. The game unraveled after that. It stopped being a game and turned into something else. Caleb leaned back, looking at the ceiling, said, you remember that night after Nathan's mom passed? I nodded. You made me tea and sat with me in the backyard. I didn't say a word for an hour, and you just sat there. You didn't leave. He looked at me. I never forgot that. I felt my throat tighten. I remembered that night too. It had rained earlier. The air had that earthy, heavy smell. He had looked so lost. I didn't do anything, I whispered. Caleb shook his head. That's the point. You didn't leave. Lucas was next. He looked at me sideways, his voice playful but heavy underneath. You know, he said, I used to think Nathan was lucky. Used to. I raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. If I were him, I wouldn't leave you alone like this. My breath caught. I laughed, too hard, too fast, but no one else did. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've always liked you, he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. He just said it, like it was the simplest truth in the world. I didn't know what to say. I felt the room close in around me, warm, tight, breathless. I looked down at my glass. It was empty again. The touches started small. Caleb's knee brushed mine and didn't move. Lucas rested his hand against my back for a second too long when he leaned in to grab the wine. Ethan placed his glass next to mine and let his fingers graze my wrist when he pulled away. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But it did. I knew it, and they knew I knew. The space between us was shrinking, not physically, but in all the ways that mattered. I sat there on the couch, surrounded by them, smiling too much, laughing too loud, trying to pretend I didn't notice the heat building in the room. And every time I looked up, someone's eyes were already on me, lingering, quiet, heavy with something unspoken. I went to the kitchen to clear the empty plates. Ethan followed me. He didn't say anything at first, just stood behind me as I ran the water. And then, without touching me, he said, "You don't have to keep pretending." I didn't turn around. Pretending what? I asked. That you don't feel it too. I swallowed hard. The faucet kept running. My hands were shaking, but I didn't correct him. Because he was right. I did feel it. I felt it in my chest, in my stomach, in the way my whole body leaned slightly back toward him, even though I was still facing the sink. Caleb and Lucas were still in the living room, laughing about something I couldn't hear, and Ethan was right behind me, not close enough to touch, but close enough to change everything. I turned off the faucet, stared at the sink, and I thought to myself, this is the moment. This is where it shifts. This is the moment where you either pull away and go back to your life, or you let it happen. Let the storm roll in. And what I didn't know then was that crossing just one line would open a floodgate. It started with thunder, distant at first, just a soft rumble in the background, but enough to make us pause. Caleb glanced at the window. Lucas turned the music down. Ethan looked at me. "It's probably nothing," I said. But the air had changed, the kind of stillness that comes right before everything breaks loose. Heavy, waiting. And then, like the universe was answering something unspoken between us, the lights went out. The room fell into a sudden, complete silence, no hum of the fridge, no flicker of the TV in the corner, just darkness and the soft sound of rain beginning to tap on the windows. I stood there in the kitchen, barely able to see more than shadows. Someone laughed, nervous, uncertain, and then Caleb's voice, "I'll get candles." He knew where I kept them. He moved through the dark like he belonged there. When he lit the first match, I saw Ethan's face again, golden in the low flame, then Lucas's hand holding another candle, its glow dancing on the walls. The light made everything feel slower, softer, closer, like the night was folding in on itself. We gathered in the living room again, the four of us, surrounded by flickering candles and silence, no music, no distractions, just the rain, the thunder, and everything we were too afraid to say out loud. Lucas broke the silence. Truth or dare? I rolled my eyes again. He smiled. Different rules this time. Ethan poured a little more wine into my glass. Caleb sat beside me, close enough that our legs touched, but not quite leaning in. "All right," I said. "Dare." Lucas didn't hesitate. "Tell us something you wish your husband knew about you." The room went still. I looked down at the candle between us, watched the flame dance, tried to think of something easy, something surface level. But the words came out before I could stop them. "I wish he knew I'm still here," I whispered. "I wish he could look at me and see me again. I wish he'd stop walking past me like I'm furniture. I wish he knew I'm not just his wife, I'm me. And I matter." My voice cracked at the end, just a little. No one spoke. Caleb reached for my hand, just held it, no words, no squeeze, just presence. Ethan moved first. He knelt in front of me, slow, steady, and placed his hand over mine. His eyes didn't waver. "You do matter," he said. Then Lucas, ever the bold one, leaned over and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His touch was light, barely there, but it lit something inside me I'd tried for so long to smother. I didn't pull away, not from Ethan's hand, not from Caleb's warmth beside me, not from the way Lucas looked at me, like he was asking a question with his eyes. And I answered without a single word. Ethan leaned in first, his lips brushed mine like a question, not demanding, not forceful, just asking. And I answered. Then Caleb, slower, more tentative, like he was crossing a line he'd drawn in his own mind long ago. And Lucas, his kiss was different, hot, hungry, certain. One after the other, 3 different kisses, 3 different truths, and me in the center of it all, letting go. Time lost its shape. There was only breath, fingertips on skin, soft gasps in the glow of candlelight, a rhythm I couldn't resist. One hand led to another, a shoulder brushed, a shirt lifted, someone whispered my name, and I didn't stop it. I didn't want to. Because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about what was right or wrong. I wasn't thinking about Nathan. I wasn't thinking at all. I was feeling, for the first time in so long, I felt wanted, alive, whole. It didn't last forever. The candles eventually burned low. The storm eased into silence. Our bodies quieted, and for a moment, there was just breath, soft, slow, tangled together in a space we'd changed forever. I looked at the ceiling, listened to the rain as it faded, felt the weight of what we'd done settle around me like a second skin. And I whispered to myself, what happened next? I still haven't forgiven myself for. Because some lines, once crossed, can't ever be uncrossed. The next morning, they were gone. No doors slammed, no whispered goodbyes, just silence. I woke up alone on the couch, my blanket barely covering me, the soft scent of skin and candle wax still clinging to the air. The living room was spotless. The wine glasses had been rinsed, the plates stacked beside the sink, the candles blown out. They left no trace, except in me. I sat there for a long time, knees pulled to my chest, heartbeat in a strange, irregular rhythm, not fast, not panicked, just off, out of tune, like something inside me had shifted and couldn't quite find its way back. I looked around the room. The couch cushions were fluffed, the floor was clean, everything looked normal. But I wasn't. I went upstairs, took a shower so hot it burned my skin, scrubbed until I was red, like I could erase the night from my body if I just tried hard enough. But no matter how long I stood under the water, I couldn't wash away the way Ethan's fingers felt around my wrist, or the sound Caleb made when I touched his face, or the heat in Lucas's breath when he whispered my name. I wrapped myself in a towel and stared into the mirror. I didn't recognize my own eyes. They looked too alive, too full, too broken. I sat at the edge of the bed for what felt like hours. The guilt came in waves, not just for what I'd done, but for how right it had felt in the moment, how I had wanted it, how I hadn't even flinched when the line was crossed. I picked up our wedding photo again, the same one I couldn't look at the night before. Nathan's eyes in the picture looked young, hopeful. Mine did too. I ran my fingers over the glass and whispered, "I'm sorry." But I didn't know who I was saying it to, him or myself. That afternoon, Nathan came home. I heard the car in the driveway, the familiar sound of the engine shutting off, his footsteps up the path, the jingle of keys, and then the door swung open. He looked tired, jet-lagged, distracted. He dropped his bag by the door and walked over to me. He kissed my cheek, said, "Missed you." I flinched, not a big movement, barely noticeable, but I felt it, the way my body pulled back before my mind could stop it. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did and just didn't want to ask. He walked into the kitchen, started unpacking the groceries he'd picked up, like everything was fine, like nothing had changed. And I stood there, pretending. Pretending my skin didn't remember the feel of someone else's touch. Pretending my mouth hadn't kissed 3 different men in one night. Pretending I wasn't shattering on the inside. Later, while Nathan took a shower, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan, just a period, nothing more. Then Lucas, "No regrets. Just don't hate yourself." And finally, Caleb, "We don't have to talk about it, ever. Just know I'm still here if you need someone to listen." That one broke me. Because it wasn't seductive. It wasn't romantic. It was just kind. And kindness, in that moment, felt heavier than anything else. I didn't reply to any of them. I set my phone down, walked to the kitchen, opened the cabinet, pulled out a glass, and filled it with water. My hand was shaking. I held it with both hands. Nathan came in behind me, drying his hair with a towel. He wrapped an arm around my waist, kissed my neck, said, "I'll order Thai tonight. You deserve a break." I nodded, smiled, sipped my water, and felt everything inside me scream. Because I was no longer the woman he thought he was holding. I was someone else now, and I didn't know how to be both. The guilt didn't hit like a crash. It settled like dust, everywhere, in the corners of my mind, in the pit of my stomach, in the silence between us. I watched Nathan laugh at something on his phone. He offered me a bite of his spring roll, and I took it, and I thought, does he know? Can he feel it, this space between us now? Or has the distance become so familiar that he wouldn't notice if I drifted all the way out of reach? I slept beside him that night, eyes open in the dark, his back to me, my body still, my heart loud. I kept hearing Caleb's message in my mind, "We don't have to talk about it." But it was all I could think about. I started writing again, not anything elaborate, not poetry or essays, just scribbles, little sentences in a leather-bound journal I hadn't touched in years. One night, I pulled it from the drawer beside my bed, opened it to a blank page, and just began. At first, the words were stiff, hesitant. Then they poured. I don't know who I am anymore. I miss the way I used to laugh. I don't know if I regret it or if I'm afraid that I don't. I wrote late at night, when Nathan was asleep, when the house was quiet, when the only sound was the scratching of my pen and the occasional sigh that escaped my chest before I could stop it. I kept dreaming of that night, not just the physical parts, though those came too, soft, vivid, lingering. But more than that, I dreamed of the way Ethan looked at me, like I was more than just someone's wife. The way Caleb listened, like my words had weight. The way Lucas touched my shoulder, like I was fire and he wanted to burn. And in those dreams, I was alive again, not just existing, not just keeping things together, alive. I kept asking myself, was it about them, or was it about me? Was it about feeling wanted, or about getting back at the silence? Was it revenge for every missed anniversary, every cold shoulder, every night Nathan chose his inbox over my voice? Or was it something darker, a crack in my own foundation? Maybe it was both. Maybe I broke something because something in me was already broken. I imagined telling Nathan. The thought made my chest tighten, my mouth go dry. I pictured his face, the disbelief, the betrayal, the way he might shut down and never come back. Or worse, how he might look at me with pity instead of rage. Would he scream? Leave? Say nothing? Or would he realize he hadn't truly touched me in months, that he'd been living beside me, not with me? I imagined running, packing a bag, leaving a note, disappearing into some nameless town, getting a small apartment, starting over. No husband, no shame, no pretending. But I also imagined staying, saying nothing, going back to my routines, letting the weight of what happened press down until I could no longer feel it. There's no manual for this kind of mistake, no chapter that tells you how to carry yourself after you've crossed a line you swore you never would. I kept looking at myself in the mirror and turning away, not because I was disgusted, but because I didn't know how to face a version of myself I didn't recognize. This woman, the one who let 3 men into her house and then let them into her body, wasn't the woman I thought I was. But maybe she was the woman I really am. Maybe I've just been hiding her for years, under motherhood, under marriage, under duty and loyalty and exhaustion. And maybe she finally clawed her way out. And here's the truth I can't run from, it felt good. Not just the touch, not just the kisses, but the recognition. To be noticed, desired, chosen, even if just for one night, even if it came at the cost of everything else. So I keep circling the question in my mind, like a mantra I can't silence. Was I wrong for wanting something that made me feel human again? Not loved, not rescued, just seen. Because for so long, I was a shadow, moving through a life that looked fine from the outside, smiling for family photos, laughing at dinner parties, but inside, I was screaming, and no one heard me. Until they did. I don't have an answer yet. I don't know if forgiveness is possible, from Nathan, from the world, or even from myself. I just know this: sometimes we make choices not because they're right or wrong, but because we've reached a place where silence has started to rot us from the inside, and one moment of light, however fleeting, however flawed, feels worth the fall. But is it? Is it really? Do emotional needs justify immoral decisions? What would you have done? Have you ever felt invisible in your own marriage? Not unloved, not abused, just invisible. Like you're still there, in the house, doing all the things you're supposed to do, but no one's really looking at you anymore? Like you're a ghost in your own kitchen. Like your voice echoes but never lands. Like you could scream or disappear or fall apart, and no one would notice until the laundry stopped getting folded. That's what it was like for me. And I wonder how many people are walking around carrying that same kind of quiet ache. Can loneliness really drive you to do the unthinkable? Because I didn't plan this. I didn't want it to happen. But when it did, I didn't stop it either. It's easy to say what we'd never do until we find ourselves face to face with the version of ourselves we swore we'd never become. So I'll ask you, from one human heart to another, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you have opened the door? Would you have let them in? Would you have stopped it? Or would you have let yourself feel something for the first time in years? Comment below. Tell me. Tell each other. Maybe I'm not the only one trying to make sense of a moment that broke the rules but woke something up in me. Maybe I'm not alone. And maybe you're not either. And if this story touched something in you, if it made you feel seen or heard or less alone, I hope you'll stay. Like, share, and subscribe to Secrets and Lies for more real, raw, and heartbreaking stories. We don't just tell stories here. We expose secrets, the kind most people take to the grave. Letting them changed me forever, not because of what we did, but because it showed me how broken I had become. Because sometimes, the betrayal isn't in the act. It's in the silence that came before it. The years of neglect, the empty dinners, the eyes that stopped looking. Infidelity doesn't always start in the bedroom. It starts in the silence between two people who've stopped seeing each other. And when the silence becomes too loud, sometimes you open the door, even if you don't know why, even if it costs you everything.